Amen. Remain standing for the reading of God's Word. I'm in Mark 5. A large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had been the subject to bleeding for 12 years. She'd suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I'll be healed. Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Lord, we come to you today to learn a little bit more about what you did in Jesus Christ in that moment right there. Jesus, we want you to show us how you choose to communicate. Because the way that you choose to communicate in the Gospels is the way that you choose to communicate through us, even today, because you don't change. Lord, I ask that you would grab a hold of this room, grab a hold of every heart, soul, and spirit in this room. I ask that you would dominate this room. We want to be subject to your lordship because we praise you and we trust you. And so we want for everything that is said and heard to fall within the scope of your divine revealed truth. We love you. Amen. You may be seated. We are continuing, no we're not, we're closing. We are continuing, but we're continuing now to close this series. It is the series that we have called Us. It is Last Things. It's what's the stuff that God put on Pastor Nathan's heart that he's got to say it. And they all have fallen within some form or another within the realm of community and us. And so this is the last one, and it's communication, which I don't think is a hard sell for any of you. If we're going to have a series about being a good community, communication has got to be in there. I want to tell you about a time when something was communicated to me in a way that gave me a feeling of conviction that communication in a godly form has to be a little bit weird. And I've said that in many conversations with some of you, that as you grow in your faith and as the life of Christ becomes stronger within you, your communication to the people around you will become more and more weird. I'll tell you what happened. I've got to set the stage a little bit. In Uganda, 2% of the population have a university degree, 2%. So if you are sitting with anyone who is in university or has a degree, you're talking with the top 2 educated percent of the country. My dear brother and friend, Reverend James, had not just a university degree and not even just a master's degree, he had a doctorate. Dr. Reverend James. The teeny percent of respected, highly educated, and he wanted to have lunch with me when we were leaving the country. So Jade and Nathan and James and Carolyn, we met together for lunch, and Jade and I were just thrilled that people of this caliber would want to have lunch with us to say goodbye. Now here's that moment of communication that was weird. And this is what I want for you to try to grab a hold of this, because I want all of you to be this weird. And I want to be this weird in your life. As they're sitting there, he was telling me how excited he was to be sitting with me. And then he and his wife went into greater detail on how excited they were to sit with me. They said that they were up, specifically James was up late the last night shining his shoes. He tells me this. Then Carolyn says, and he actually made sure that we left the house early enough that even if our car were to break down, we had time to get alternative transportation to still be here on time to meet with you. I was in tears. Do you know what it feels like to have somebody that you admire reveal to you things that are that humbling, that humble? This is how much I cared about. I want to be with you so much that last night, the last thing I did was shine my shoes. And when we left this morning, I wanted to make sure that we left in time that if the car broke down, I could still get alternative transportation to meet with you. Do you say weird stuff like that? Stuff that is really, it's really what you feel. I was going for a walk with somebody this week, and I said, we don't say that very much. You know, it's funny. Africans, a lot of Africans actually said that kind of thing to me. They just say, this is the full depth of how I feel about you. And the funny thing is, I think we Americans feel that stuff. I think we actually do some of that stuff. We don't usually say it, but we feel it. We feel that kind of affection and admiration for one another. There's something to be said for being that weird, though, that we communicate that kind of affection. That's what Jesus has done in this passage. Now, typically, this passage I just read to you is about healing. And it is second. First, it's about communication. This woman has chosen the way to communicate, and many of us pick this method. It's that I have something to get done, but I'm just me. And so I'm just going to slip through the crowd. I don't want to bother them. I don't want to make a fuss. I don't want to draw attention to myself or to the problem. I'm just going to slip through the crowd and I'm just going to touch the back. That was her chosen method of communication. And Jesus could have allowed her. Notice that she was already healed. He continued to do something after she was healed. He changed the way he communicated with her. The first step was that she chose the method of communication that was a non-face-to-face, backdoor, hidden touching. He said, no, somebody needed something serious. I'm going to hunt for this person in a crowd in order to elevate the intimacy of our connection. And he did it, didn't he? He looked her in the face and he said, what was the first word? Daughter. She did not behave like a daughter, did she? She behaved like an unwanted stranger. And yet he sought her out in a crowd in order to elevate the communication. That's what we're going to talk about today. 3 ideas elevating your communication. And I know that I don't need to sell to you how important communication is. Can I just give you one pair of statistics to just prove it to you? When we are divorced, 67% of divorces occur because of poor communication. 12% of married couples say that they have good communication. Can we do the math on that? We don't need to. We don't want to. Don't do the math on that. Let's elevate our communication. That's not just in marriage. We know that that's in our friendships. That's in our neighborliness. That's in our co-working relationships. That's in our church community. The success of us hinges on elevated communication. And I'm going to give us 3 ideas today that I believe if we can grab, even if you could just grab one of them, you're going to experience a dramatic shift in your relationships to the people around you. Not the least of these would be your spouse. First is the concept of speaking from the heart. Speaking from the heart. And you'll notice that lots of things that I say come back to this speaking from the heart. I'm going to say a little bit more about that, but I want to point at an example just to underline how powerful the concept of speaking from the heart is. Everyone's heard of the I have a dream speech, right? Yeah? Well, a lot of good feedback today. Have you heard of the I have a dream speech? Yes. Wow. All right. Thank you. That speech was actually written as in a collaboration of leaders and people who have had great minds and thinking. And one of them who actually kind of put all the collaborative words together, his name was Clarence Jones. And he was sitting up there on that stage. You know, when you see the video of Martin Luther King Jr. giving that speech, there's people back behind him. You probably didn't know that he knew all of them, and some of them were even involved in the writing of that speech. Well, he had already given some speech before that, and then he paused, and there was this feeling in the air that something needed to be said. And Clarence Jones was sitting there, but there was also a singer. Her name was Mahalia Jackson. And she said, she could feel it. It takes an artist to feel this kind of thing. She said, "Tell him about the dream, Martin." She knows what's in Martin's heart. Tell him about the dream, Martin. And at that moment, when he paused and heard her say, "Tell him about the dream," Clarence Jones said, "These people don't know it, but they're about to go to church." Why did he say that? Why did she say, "Tell him about the dream"? Why was the speech even called, "I Have a Dream"? Some of us have seen the famous TED Talk, where the TED Talk speaker points out that there's a reason it's called the "I Have a Dream" speech, not the "I Have a Plan" speech. It's because the power of that speech originates in the heart of the speaker. He spoke from his heart. She told him, "Speak about your heart." When Clarence Jones knew that he was going to speak from his heart, he said, "We're about to go to church." Because when people who have a stirred heart speak from their heart, it's a completely different speech. And so is your everyday conversation, which is and should be the most thrilling thing you can think of when it comes to conversation, and the scariest. Because now the words that you speak in a conversation depend on what's happening in your heart. Luke 6. This is what Jesus says about it. "No good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. People do not pick figs from thorn bushes or grapes from briars." Some of us have tried to do that, haven't we? Especially when you're friends with a briar and you have tried to pick fruit from that briar. Maybe you are the briar. People around you are being graceful and trying to pick fruit from your briar branches. "A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of." You cannot speak inconsistently with what is in your heart. You can't. This is one of the things that I've actually noticed is the major difference between non-Christian leadership books and Christian leadership books. Non-Christian leadership books are all about behaviors, models, actions. You need to do this, act like this, teach your people this, display this for them, and organize them in this way, as if it doesn't matter what's in your heart. Because to the secular world, it doesn't. It's business. Christian leadership is different. Christian leadership begins with, you need to become a leader. Now, after that, there does need to be some instruction and training on how you go about exercising that becoming, but we don't take for granted that everything we say and do in this life is a pouring out of the heart. And you can't just pretend. If it isn't in here, it's going to be fake coming out of here. And so, speak out of the heart, but that brings to question what's in the heart. We've seen this whenever somebody says sorry. Oh man, there's a lot of different kinds of sorry. Well, I'm sorry you got your feelings hurt. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. It's not about the words, you guys. It's not about the words. The words bounce out of the heart, and even the very same words adjust and feel completely different based on the heart from which they are spoken. I hope you do a good job today. I hope you hit a home run today. I hope you do a great job. You can see it in the face. You can't fake it. You can't fake that. It comes out of the heart. This brings to us two major concepts. The first one is in how do you receive words from other people? How do you receive words from other people? And here's the summary statement. Always filter words of others through their heart. Always. Please don't go through life. This is a painful way to go through life, allowing for the words that somebody speaks to just hit you right in the face as all truth. You haven't measured it. You haven't thought about it. The context didn't matter. The heart didn't matter. Can you believe what they said? Now, sticks and stones break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Of course, we know that that's not true. This person in your life may say something that actually hurts. It has an immediate emotional impact that's painful. You can't not feel that, but you can, in the longer processing of what they say, you can include in what they say the heart from which they said it. And you have to. If you want to have any ability to move through this world and not have every single thing that's said to you be the most horrible, it's the highest or lowest thing that's ever been said. Second, spend more time on the source of your words than the phrasing. So think about when you go through life and you're thinking, what do I want to say to this person? We usually spend lots and lots of time on what we want to say. How much time do you spend thinking about from where do I want to say it? From where within me am I speaking? Don't spend so much time about your phrasing and your vocabulary and what you want to say. Spend more time attending to the places within you from which you speak. If you take care of the places from within you, from where you speak, and allow for Jesus to begin to transform that, you don't have to spend so much energy filtering your mouth. We sometimes have these people in our lives and we laugh and say they don't have a filter. That's a very poor characteristic of a person. Not only low discipline, but it means that the things that we say, it's actually pointing to what's inside. You shouldn't need much of a filter. You know that? The whole concept of a filter means that there's rotten stuff inside and we've gotten good at trapping it before it comes out. And what Jesus moves to is don't even let the rotten stuff be inside. Why are we thinking about that and dwelling on that? Allow your heart to be purified so that you need less of a filter. You can speak out of your heart. You can't get good fruit from a briar. That's what the whole concept is of a filter, is briars sounding like fruit. But if you're a good tree, if you're a good heart, good stuff comes out. You don't have to work too hard at it. Pure hearts speak pure words with very little effort. Jade and I, sometimes when we get into arguments, as you've noticed, especially when we preach, you can imagine how we argue. We argue. We know how. Oh, we know how. When we argue, there's a statement that we always come back to, which typically is the turning point in the argument. What do you want out of this? Our miscommunication in our marriage and probably in your marriage and in your friendships as well, is when words are stated and they're just received, and I haven't thought about your heart, and I just process those words, and then I give you words back, and there's tons of words in the air. Where the tipping point comes is when one of us asks the other one, what do you want out of this? Now I'm skipping past the words and into your heart. What are you trying to accomplish? And usually you find that there's some deep stuff in there that I totally understand. We just need to put words to it. Here's the words to it. Communication is mostly about intention. It's mostly about intention. Don't get too caught up in the words that are given to you. Try to look behind those words. And don't get too infatuated about your own words. Ask yourself about the intention behind your words. Especially when you're with groups of people. When you go sit in the car, just think through not what you said, but the intention of what you said. What was I trying to get? What was I trying to prove? What was I trying to cause? What's lacking in my life that I was trying to make up for? You see, it's not about the words so much as it is the intention. When the intention becomes purified, we don't need much of a filter because good words come from good hearts. Are we together on this idea? All right, that's what I mean by speaking from the heart. Second big idea is, what is unwholesome talk? We've read this before, particularly in Ephesians. Let no unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. Now, typically, we reduce this unwholesome talk to cussing and dirty jokes. I'm going to bring to your attention some ideas that might broaden. I want to broaden our concept of unwholesome talk because I think it will also give a wide road that can become traction for wholesome talk. You can't know you are being unwholesome if you don't know what unwholesomeness is, and therefore you can't also know that you're being wholesome if you don't know what unwholesomeness is. Unwholesomeness is this: anything that promotes or indicates health. Unwholesome talk is anything that promotes or indicates unhealth, meaning that it promotes unhealth in you and it indicates unhealth in me. Wholesome talk is anything that promotes or indicates health. It promotes healthiness in you, and it indicates healthiness in me. That's wholesome talk. I'm going to give some common unwholesome causes. They appear to be good, but they actually begin and end in unhealth. Anytime we're having a conversation, we need to be having a dialogue in the back of our head. What am I trying to cause? What am I trying to cause in this conversation? Am I just speaking? What am I trying to cause? Here are common unwholesome causes, meaning causes, things we're trying to cause that begin and end in unhealth. First, moral grandstanding. You'll notice that these three are very common today. Very common. You can find them everywhere. Moral grandstanding. Moral grandstanding uses a public discussion to impress other people with their moral qualities. I'm going to stand before you and make such a loud soapbox point, and the whole idea is that you all know how great my moral qualities are. And so we all become these isolated soapbox speakers at each other to prove that we're a good person. This appears to be okay because it looks like this is a person who is passionate, this is a person who cares about things, this is a person who is moral, but actually there is no desire to really convince you of the moral quality. We're not trying to come to an agreement. The agreement that I want everyone to come to is that I am moral. You see that? It's not even a discussion. Moral grandstanding looks like elitism, power, control, dominance, but it's cloaked as a moral compass. And it becomes very divisive because it's not seeking common ground. It's just trying to prove that I am good. So in that, what we see is something appears to be good. It looks like morality, but it's actually divisive elitism. That's very dangerous. Why am I bringing this up here? It looks wholesome. when someone stands and they make a statement of moral quality, and we look at them and think, wow, you're so moral. You really care about things. We think that's wholesome. It might be, but if it's given in a way that presses away that you guys are all like that and I'm the one that's got it figured out, that's coming from someplace unhealthy in them and creating something unhealthy in you. We're now divided apart. There is a way to communicate moral value in the world without dividing the world in half and alienating people, regardless of whether they even agree with the speaker. That's moral grandstanding. Second is misplaced bonding. So here's how it looks wholesome. It looks wholesome because I'm trying to create a bond with you. That's a good thing, isn't it? That's a healthy thing. Not necessarily. I said misplaced bonding. And you've all experienced this. Maybe you haven't organized it in this way. Misplaced bonding could be lying or exaggerating, like giving you the information that you want to hear, even if it's not true, because I want to celebrate you and that gives us a bonding moment. But it's actually a lie. Or gossiping. Gossiping is misplaced bonding. It's creating this shared space that you and I can enjoy together. Did you hear? Now they are over there, but you and I have this information together. Could even look like criticism. This is the most common form of misplaced bonding today. A group of people who find something that they agree with and they criticize someone who's not there. What that does is it presses this person who isn't even there to defend their point, presses them out so that we can have a shared space where we're all included. That's misplaced bonding. We have now bonded over criticism, pushing somebody out. It looks wholesome because we are pointing at the evil, but it actually comes from an unhealthy desire in me and promotes unhealthiness in the listener, in the person that I'm speaking with. That's misplaced bonding. Lastly is a search for security or control. We all want security. We all want some sense of control. There doesn't appear to be anything terribly wrong in that. It originates in fear, but it displays as anger, avoidance, and blaming. Unwholesome. I'm giving these to you and explaining them because I know that even as I'm talking, instances, relationships, persons are flashing through your mind, and you might even be getting some language that helps you to understand why those conversations and those relationships have been uncomfortable. Part of the reason that they've been uncomfortable is because you didn't yet address it as unwholesome. Unwholesome is not just cussing and dirty jokes. Unwholesome is anything that comes from unhealth and causes unhealth. So what is wholesome? It's anything that comes from health and causes health. Ephesians 4, verse 29. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths. That's what we've just talked about. But then Paul gives us 3 big ideas of how to make something wholesome. But only what is, first, helpful for building others up. Good for building up. So that's your first question. After we talk, do you feel bigger or did I win? Are you with me? When I speak in wholesome language with somebody, what that means is it came from a healthy place in me and it causes healthiness in you. Paul says that is good for building up. What that means is when someone speaks with me, do they leave that conversation feeling bigger or did I win? If I won, moral grandstanding. I beat them. I won. And I divided us. That's not wholesome. Wholesome is that when you leave, you feel bigger. Second, helpful for building others up according to their needs. Helpful for building others up according to their needs. Some of you may have a translation that said, fits the occasion. some more than others, but all of us to some extent speak just from us. This is my perspective. And there's actually, I was going to put it up on the screen. There was a funny New York, I think it was a New Yorker cartoon that's just a picture of a cocktail party. And there's one guy that's in the middle like this. And the thing at the bottom says, "Behold, as I carefully adjust the conversation into my small area of expertise." You know anybody like this? It's like you can only talk to that person about the stuff that they know a lot about. That's common, and it can be fun because we talk about the stuff that we're interested in. But what Paul says here is, but only what is helpful for building up others according to their needs. You know right now the people in your life who talk about your needs. You know who they are. And it might be a short list, but you know who they are. That I know when I talk with that person, I don't feel like I'm just any sounding board and I could be subbed out and somebody else could come in and they wouldn't miss a beat. They would just keep talking about their hobby. When I talk with that person, I get to share my need. That matters so much. We need to be that for each other. You see, one of the keys to this entire concept that I'm preaching about today is that you can't make anyone in this room a good communicator. Only you can do that for you. So whatever you know that you need from the community, you can't make the community do that. Your best contribution is just to be a better communicator. And if you know that when I say that people, one of the qualities of good discussions is when we address their needs, you know who the people are in your life that listen to your needs. Do you do that for other people? That's wholesome talk. Wholesome talk continues, that it may benefit those who listen. Some of you have a translation that said, gives grace. That it gives grace. Ask yourself, when I talk with people, do I make them feel favored? Wholesome talk is communication from my health to your health. We've talked about two ideas, speaking from the heart, unwholesome talk, and now you've noticed both of these are about talking. What's the part I've missed? Listening. Listening is everything. I'm going to take a couple of seconds here. If you have your notes, write down the actual names. Who listens to you? Who listens to you? If you don't have notes, just think that Rolodex. I think you have to be older than 30 to know what a Rolodex is. Who listens to you? What are their names? Now, can I make a point? I suspect that when we think about that question, I did not tell you what to do with the word listen, but I bet you picked the highest form of the word listen. Now, when I ask you, do you listen to the people around you? How do you define the word listen now? I saw this question in a book. Who listens to you? And this thought just went through my head of what a powerful question. We all agree that listening is incredibly important, right? How many people do you know in your life? I would guess that everyone in here knows 1,000 people. But when I ask you the question, who listens to you? Are you willing to shout out a number? How many people in your life would you say, when I define listen with full integrity, I'm going to define it at its highest form, how many people is that? The highest number I just heard was 6. You guys, there's 140 of us in here. Let's talk about listening. Listening is the first and the last thing we do in this life. It is one of the very first things that babies do. Babies at 14 weeks listen and respond. They can hear. And it's one of the very last things that we lose. In a normal process of dying, lots of stuff starts to go away, but that's why when we're losing loved ones, we still get up in their ear and we whisper truth into their ear, don't we? Because we know, they can still hear you. They can still hear you. It's one of the things we say about people on their deathbed. They may be laying and not moving. They haven't responded in weeks. They can't eat. They can't, but we still whisper in their ear because they can hear. It's one of the first and the last things that we do. I want to draw our attention to a text that we may not have thought was about listening. Open your Bibles to Mark 4. Mark chapter 4. The parable of the soils is a parable about listening. I'm not going to read the first half. That's the part that most of us remember. It's when the farmer threw the seed and different things happened to the seed. And so sometimes it grew up, sometimes it didn't. Most of the time it didn't. Then, after he had told that story to the crowd, the disciples came and they asked for clarification. Can you tell us what that meant? And this is what he says. Then Jesus said to them, "Don't you understand this parable? How then will you understand any parable? The farmer sows the word." Before I even go further, I want to take you into the Greek translation. That word there, word, is translated as logos, which is the same Greek word that John uses, logos. It refers to, in our Bible, it refers to the divinity of Jesus. So that's the crossover that we should be reading there. Some people are like seed along a path where the word is sown. As soon as they hear it, Satan comes and takes away the word that was sown in them. Others, like seed sown on rocky places, hear the word and at once receive it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. Still others, like seed sown among thorns, hear the word, but the worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desires for other things come in and choke the word, making it unfruitful. Others, like seed sown on good soil, hear the word, accept it, and produce a crop. Some 30, some 60, some 100 times what was sown. 4 kinds of listeners. Remember how the story begins. Some people are like seed sown along a path where the word is sown as soon as they hear it. Therefore, the entire explanation of the parable of the soils is in the context of speaking and listening. What is spoken? The divinity of Jesus. Jesus himself is spoken into us. Now, who can hear it, who can't hear it, and why? That's the parable. The first example, the birds ate it, which he explains as Satan takes it away, which means Satan and evil make listening impossible. Second example, rocky soil. Jesus explains that this is no roots, meaning can't endure hardship. How do we understand that? Listening relies on personal success. What that means is my faith hasn't gone deep, therefore I only hear Christ when life is going well. You see that? I can't even, because my faith is so weak, when things don't go well, even if you speak Jesus to me, I can't hear it because life's not going well. That's what he's explaining there. Third, thorns choked it. Here's what he said. They are those who hear the word. They hear Jesus in his divinity expressed to us, but the first cares of this world. So the question we ask ourselves is, can I hear anyone with different cares? Caring for this world mutes Christ. Sometimes the people in our lives, Jesus is speaking through them to us, and our ears are plugged by caring for all this. When we live down here, we can't hear words from up there. They get muted because we've got all this going on. That's what that's saying. Then he says that it can be muted by deceitfulness of riches. Is it possible, and I'm saying, quote, riches. It's not necessarily money. It's if you're rich in anything, if life is going well. Is it possible that riches deceive my hearing? Wealth can mute Christ. And it continues, and the desire for other things. If you don't want what I want, can I hear you? Desire for other things. Selfishness mutes Christ. If I want what I want and you want something different, Jesus can't speak through you into me. We are the soil, and Jesus is the word, and that parable is for us. We have often made that a parable about our ability. We're the good soil, and we sure hope there's some good soil out there, because what this parable's about is us being able to tell people about the good news of Jesus Christ. And that's true, but it's more applied to us. Can we speak Jesus into one another? I'm going to ask the band to come. We're going to have a time of just some reflection at the end. Are you good soil? Does your healthiness make Christ louder? If not, steps need to be taken. Are there things in your life that if someone were to try to speak Jesus into you, you couldn't hear it? Do you speak out of unhealthiness? And it doesn't mean that we go around patting each other on the back all the time. That's one of the tough challenges we have as a Christian community, is that we either just encourage, but if something's wrong, I can't say anything. I'm just going to go over here and say stuff over here to them. Healthy communities say hard things face to face. Healthy Christian, God-fearing, God-filled communities say very hard things face to face. Jason was painting in his living room, and a thought came into his mind. Jason Hayes. Thought came into his mind. And it was an old thought. He just remembered something that had happened, and full transparency, as he told me about it, I had nearly completely forgot that it happened. But it was something that he felt, this is between me and Pastor Nathan. And I didn't even realize it was creating a wedge, but as he described it, there was still some brokenness there. It was an interaction that we had to discuss, something that I had said, it was in the heat of a moment, and it caused brokenness in him, and he needed to communicate that to me. You guys, he did. He called me, pausing from his painting, called me and said, "How are you?" He went through the normal steps and then said, "I just had something I wanted to bring up. I realized that I had some brokenness and I did not want it to become a barrier in our relationship with one another. I think we're too close for this to be in the way. Here's what happened." And he brought, do you have any idea how long ago it was? 2-3 months? Maybe 2 or 3 months. What could Jason have done? He could have told other board members, be careful with Nathan because, this one time he said this to me. And so he can be kind of mean. He could have buried it deep inside of him and just said, well, I'm not talking to Nathan anymore, because do you know how we move forward? How does our marriage succeed? How do we experience a weird high life together? It's when we do stuff like what he did. I love you so much that I don't want this thing to get in the way. And I know that you are better than that. I'm going to read your heart, Nathan. You speak out of your heart and I trust your heart, and this felt inconsistent with your heart. So I just want to talk to you about it face to face. Do you do that? I want to challenge us to elevate our conversation. Don't text it. Don't text it, please. Be weird and say it face to face. That used to be our only option. My wife just got a box of things from her grandfather, letters, and was reading through them. And the language that was used, we all have letters from our grandpas. And we got to see the way people spoke to one another. We can do that too. It can be way better than texting. You don't need to leave a voicemail. Be weird enough to say, I'm so happy to be having coffee with you that I went out last night and I got a dress just for this. And when you leave, I want you to want to talk to me again. I might even say something hard right now, but I want you to know I'm on your side, and I want you to try to read my heart because I want to make sure we don't mess this up. Can I just give you some ideas? This is what healthy people sound like in their brains when they communicate. I want to understand you. I want to encourage you. I want our conversation to bring you hope and make you feel bigger. After we talk, I want you to desire to talk to me again. After we talk, I want to carry within me something valuable I learned from you. Do you know that that's actually what makes good listeners? Listening is not just something that we put on, and it's not just a practice. Good listeners actually believe in the person that they're listening to. They believe there's value there. And so good listeners are digging. That's why you like talking to them, because they're digging. They're trying to get it out. And you feel, ooh, it's coming out. Whenever I talk to that person, I say more than I usually do. Why? Because they care about you. When you talk to people, do they get that feeling from you? We're going to end with a time of praise and worship, but you also have an opportunity. When I asked who listens to you, if that person is in the room, can you be weird enough to tell them? Just go to them and say, you are a great listener in my life. Thank you. You're on a short list. If there's somebody that you need to repair, maybe there's communication that's broken and you need to do that this morning. If there is an honest, weird truth that you need to give to somebody, and you said, you know what, all pride and awkwardness and cultural acceptability aside, I think you are awesome. And I love it when you ask me to hang out with you. I'm intimidated to ask you to hang out with me, but when you bring it up, I love it, and I always enjoy the time that we spend together. We all feel this. And when we say it, we all love it. You love it when somebody says that kind of stuff to you. It's fine to be that weird that we actually say, here from the healthiness of my heart, as Christ is reworking who I am, allow me to speak into the healthiness of Christ's work in you. We've got a few minutes to do that now. Feel free to just get up and walk around. Those of you who have attended here for a while, you know the drill. You just do what you want. Let Holy Spirit move around the room. We're going to sing a song, and at the close, we're going to move into our weeks.